We'll wrap up with tight end. And I mean, going into the draft, there's one kind of quote unquote generational talent, and then the rest, right? And Brock Bowers, love what he brings to the table. Hate the landing spot more than I could say. We've got in some of my keeper leagues, obviously, some drafts coming up shortly, and he was one who I was up there thinking like, hey, if Marvin Harrison Jr. is gone, I would even consider taking him number two and just being set at my tight end position for the next 10 years. But landing with Vegas and whatever you want out of, pick your poison. Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, like who's going to be throwing him the ball? Do you think he is going to be a top 10 to 12 tight end in year one? Or is he someone who probably still gets drafted, but temper your expectations a little bit here?
Yeah, I think everyone kind of cringed when the Raiders took him because exactly what you said, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, it's going to be a combination of the two throwing the ball this year. There's no way one of those guys are taking that job and running with it. Um, but I don't know. Like I kind of started working through it. And if you go through the tight ends, like, okay, you're gonna go in some kind of order, the top four is Laporta, Kelsey, Trey McBride, and Mark Andrews, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're gonna bring up, okay, we have Dalton Kincaid in Buffalo, maybe a Kyle Pitts resurgence with Kirk Cousins slash Penix. Um, Evan Ingram has actually kind of made himself relevant. But then,
Gets a little dicey.
yeah, are you gonna look me in the eye and say you're gonna take David Njoku ahead of Brock Bowers or George Kittle or Jake Ferguson or Dallas Goedert? Like Brock Bowers is gonna be drafted pretty high as a tight end. Like you said, the fit's not great. Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers are both target hogs, and Michael Mayer is kind of gonna always be on the field because he's more of a bulldozer. But if they're creative enough, which I don't believe Luke Getsy is, Bowers should be able to get on the field and be rotated around a lot, just to be used in the slot, just be a safety net for the receivers. But I don't know. I like you said, I don't like the fit. I don't like Luke Getsy as an offensive coordinator, but it's just so questionable of who else you would take above him.
Yeah, it's a combination of factors, right? You've already touched on a whole bunch of them there. I kind of view Bowers as an undeniable talent who's going to be underutilized in year one. If
Yeah.
you are a fantasy dynasty, whatever, keeper leagues, take them. Don't have too much concern about that. But if you're in a redraft league, right? If you've got an opportunity to take a Laporta or something like that, pull the trigger on it, right?
Yeah.
Go with more of a surefire pick with that selection. I think Bowers is going to be the biggest benefactor of when Devontae Adams eventually moves on
Yeah.
because it's going to open up so many targets that maybe Bowers, because again, he's a do-it-all tight end. He's not just a one-dimensional. He's out there, and if he's out there, he's running routes, right? He can block exceptionally well, right? He can chip and release. He can do a little bit of everything that you want out of a modern tight end. So I think some of the on-field contributions that he makes in 2024 are going to be great real life NFL contributions that help teams win games. I don't know if they translate into fantasy championships in year one. That's not a knock on the talent. It's not a knock on the player. It's 100% fit. And when the Raiders go out there and probably end up taking a huge swing, like I can almost even see, Deion Saunders, kid getting selected by the Raiders to be their QB1 at next year's draft. But when they replace Aiden O'Connell or Minshew, because if you roll with that combination into 2025, like, Raiders fans can have full carte blanche to march on the stadium in protest at that point. But I think he's going to be someone who really benefits down the line and blossoms into something truly exceptional. And then we're going to be having him as a, carved in stone top five tight end year after year after year after year for a long time in the NFL. But year one, temper expectations. He might be in kind of that, 500 to 700 yards receiving and maybe, 4 or 5 touchdowns is kind of what I'm
Mhm.
predicting out of a rookie campaign. And then, buckle up for 2025 onwards.
Yeah, he's gonna have a breakout sophomore season when Dak Prescott is thrown to him next year.
There you go. Jerry World's finally moving on from Dak. I kind of hope they pay him $200 million a season and blow up their entire salary
Oh,
cap, but we'll see what plays out. Who was your second favorite tight end taken in terms of landing spot, though?
um, it. I mean, you gotta go with the. I think he was the second tight end taken off the board in Ben Sinnott in Washington. There's not really any competition there. He's gonna step in. He's a super, super, super athletic tight end. He's gonna catch a lot of balls, especially if when Jaden Daniels takes over as the lead role. I don't think he's gonna be fantasy relevant this year. But yeah, no, he's someone to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's tough to say, right? Because all the other tight ends, they've got some good that obviously goes with the bad. I think Sonat has probably the easiest path to regular snaps, like you were
Exactly.
saying there.
Like
Um,
his competition is Zach Ertz. Like, come on.
yeah, and love him to death. Former Eagle will
Yes.
special place in my heart for Zach Ertz, but at this point of his career, yeah, it's tough, right? I think you could have some toss ups in between, Jatavian Sanders that went to Carolina just because who else are they starting? Like,
Yeah.
but
Tommy
even,
Tremble.
yeah, I was gonna say, even if he is the day one starter, how much production are you like, I think a breakout season for him is if he can flirt with 500 yards and like
Yeah.
3 touchdowns. Like, is that someone you're dressing on a regular week to week basis, putting up like 38 yards receiving a game? No, that's someone who will torpedo your fantasy team. So again, probably undraftable. An interesting name to watch is Theo Johnson, right? That went to the Giants, especially with all the Darren Waller drama going on right now. And, he was already flirting with, all right, am I going to retire? Now he's getting divorced. He's doing some weird things on social media. Like, there's a world in which Theo Johnson gets way more snaps and targets than I think people realize, but it's the cute quarterback there, right? Like, who they're never going to be a pass happy offense, even though I think they might need to be just because of their roster. They're going to be playing from behind quite a bit. So he's someone who I could see have a few spikes as far as like, oh, look at that. He put up a touchdown and 80 yards receiving, and all of a sudden you see some of those waiver wire bids floating in his way. But is he going to be consistent enough to be suited up every week? I don't think so. So to me, the tight end class is kind of Bowers or bust.
Yeah.
And if you're in an exceptionally deep league where maybe you're dressing 2 tight ends or something like that, that's when you can start filtering through the rest of them. But we already know, even though there have been a few that have broken the mold in terms of rookie tight end production, up until the last, what, 3, 4 years, rookie tight ends haven't done a whole heck of a lot in year one at the NFL level, right? We've seen a few that have bucked that trend, but there's not a ton that stand out to me as far as like they are so unbelievably talented that we're going to kind of put them in the same class as the Sam Laportas of the world and some of those other rookie tight ends who have truly impacted from a fantasy standpoint in year one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much more to add on the tight ends. It's Bowers, or you just put a flag on some guys like Eric All in Cincinnati. Maybe can beat out Mike Gesicki for some snaps, but like he was also a very kind of a later round pick, so you don't really want to dive too much into that unless you're in a super weird deep league or a tight end premium league.